Jason, we are here again.
Welcome back, everyone.
Welcome, welcome to the arena. So you, we share. I feel like there's a common attitude that you and I share that likely weaves its way back to the power of music. Does that seem fairly accurate?
I thought you were going to say our affinity for beards, but
Same
yeah,
thing.
music is right there with it. Yeah, absolutely.
Beards, graying beards.
Yeah.
Yeah, but music. I mean, I think so. And that is really literally the sort of the topic of this segment is so why and how and where and when for you in you grew up in St. Louis, right, Eric?
Yeah.
Or, I mean, yeah, I'm sorry, Jason. Eric is our
Yes.
producer. I did not misname you on purpose, but Jason from St. Louis, correct? Born and raised?
Yes, correct. Lived there for 40
And
years.
music, what was your first recollection of impactful music for you?
Yeah, my dad was in bands when I was a kid and, had records and music was a constant in the house. And Billy Joel and Kiss
Hmm.
were two that I remember from when I was single digits. There was always music going on, but those two were two that I was like, yeah, this is cool. Now you may disagree with those today, but Billy Joel and Kiss for me were it when I was a little kid, and I still rock them both.
All right. And just
I'm
so for
curious
the
about
sake
you
of
though. What would real quick, Mother? What would be
yeah,
the earliest recollection of
yeah, yeah.
wow, this means something to me, music for you?
Just before I go to so you when were you born? What year?
75. I just turned 50. Happy birthday to me.
Oh, happy birthday. That's a big one. I am older than you. I was born in 71. So I've turned 53. I'm going to be turning 54 this year. So our eras are similar. For me, music wise, I'm the youngest in my family. I've got two older sisters. My parents came to this country from India. This is all prelude. So meaning that my parents they didn't bring a musical influence to me. My older sisters definitely did. And so, and they were a decent amount older than I am, like 6, 7 years older. So, honestly, I'm trying to think. My earliest recollections of music were Queen. Queen. There was, I can't even remember the album. There's an album with like a robot with blood dripping off of its fingertip. I don't know what that. You remember that? Remember that album?
No, I don't know that one. It sounds like a bad dream, though.
It was
Sounds like a fever
well, as a like
dream.
a 4-year-old kid, you look at this, they were the
Yeah.
what do they call the albums that open the
Gatefold.
gatefold? So
Yeah.
gatefold, and you're just, I'm looking at my your Dr. Seuss books, this, that, and the other thing, and then you look
Yeah.
at this like robot with, again, it was just like there was, but the music too, and so like that was the era of like classic rock at this
Yeah.
point. So it was like Queen. Kiss, I never was a huge Kiss fan, but I appreciated their game without question. Same thing, Billy Joel, pretty solid. But yeah, like what people would consider classic rock is the stuff I grew up. I grew up in
Yeah.
Dayton, Ohio, in the '70s. WTUE was the radio station that everybody listened to. And it
Hmm.
was like that was the stuff, and
Yeah.
it was intoxicating. I just remember rock music back then,
Yeah.
just sort of, and I do put Billy Joel in the rock camp. That's the right camp for him?
Yeah, I think
You would
so.
think. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. So
Yeah.
so then and then I guess so everybody understands where we're going with this. So we're both born in the '70s. Music was a big thing. Why are we talking about music right now? Connect the dots between music as a little kid growing up and why you do what you do and the way you do it today?
Yeah, I mean, music's always had an impact on me, and I was one of these people. I remember when I was a kid, early teens especially. It's like, do you like music for the music or for the lyrics? Well, I was always I was always a lyrics guy, so I kind of went from Billy Joel and Kiss to Motley Crue. It
Okay.
was a little rebellious, and then that led to skateboarding, which led to punk rock.
Okay.
And with punk rock, there was so much that just screamed to me, spoke to me, whatever you want to call it, um, about that just really was resonant with me and who I was as kind of a a young kid that didn't feel like he fit in, and as a result of that, felt sort of all of these constraints and pressures to conform and be like these people that I didn't really vibe with.
Yep.
And that music really spoke to me. And so many of those lyrics were about, carving your own path, uh, being authentic, being yourself, about being resilient and just taking your future into your own hands, carving your own destiny, your own path. And that really became kind of foundational for me and how I lived my life. And eventually, I was in bands. I started a fanzine where I was
Mhm.
writing about bands. I was interacting with all these different bands. And then that eventually led to booking bands.
Okay.
And, a lot of the things that I learned and I experienced with that music, and then with sort of, I'll just call it, in air quotes, a lifestyle. But that ethos really is something that all these years later, at 50 now, I carry with me. And, sure, I've got a gray beard now, and, I'm a grown up, but, they're the scaffolding for everything in my life. They're the scaffolding for how I host dental conferences now, for how we run our business, um, all of that. And what about yourself? I mean, you've got
Yeah.
how has music continued other than just being sort of a backdrop to working out at the gym? How has it continued to influence your life?
Yeah, I mean, similarly, I'd say that trajectory. What you just, I mean, how you described it is how I described it in my how it was for me. Is I grew up on kind of classic rock, and then, it's again, we don't want to get into all the details, but I grew up very much an outsider. We were like literally the one non-white family in the entire neighborhood that I grew up in, an entire school system for the most
Mhm.
part, and so there was always I've always sort of been on the outside looking in. And I think to me, when I can't, it was a gradual evolution towards, I'll call it whatever the right word for it. I'll call it alternative slash punk slash, I mean, I like a lot of genres. And back in the day, it was hard to get exposed to music that wasn't the mainstream.
Yeah.
And so I think it was more like junior high to high school. I started reading. It was probably like reading like Rolling Stone and hearing about the Sex Pistols, and it's like, what are the Sex Pistols? And the only way to hear the Sex Pistols was to buy a Sex Pistols cassette tape, because how else are you going to hear it? You're not going to hear it on the radio. So it was just sort of like self discovery of, because there wasn't really a good way to get exposed to it. And then
Yeah.
I listened to it, and then I think there was this DIY, do it yourself ethos that was like, that's right, and to me it was like it was like the melding of being an outsider and but everything is possible. You just need to figure out a way to do it yourself. And
Hmm.
obviously the musicians in that sort of punk, and then in that next era, there weren't as good of a musicians as the Queens and the all those sort of classic rock groups, but their message that they were delivering was from the heart. And that resonated. And again, connecting the dots in a quick manner. So when I went off to college, it was through, I basically kind of grew up in the radio station at Duke, which is where I went to undergrad. So I started as a DJ, then assistant music director, then program director, then general manager. And so it really, everything that I do in business, I owe it to that experience in the radio station, which
Mhm.
it, to me, it sounds like the corollary to you is sort of the zine, putting on shows. Like there's the, we'll figure this out. I'm just like,
Mhm.
we'll find a way, we'll figure this out, because and again, I really do tie it back to what I do in business, because the world needs to know. The world needs access to this. The world needs to hear these things.
Yeah.
So when I was, doing the radio station, it was whether it was my own show or running the station. It's a bit of it's an us against them, and we're on the side of good. We are David, they are Goliath, but we're gonna get the word out. And so it absolutely is a it's impossible to disconnect that part of me from I would not be who I am if not for having music be such a strong part of my upbringing, and being, for me, it was the really mostly the DJ stuff and concerts and other things being involved with, but that, so yeah, without question.
Yeah. Yeah. And those things, though, I mean, from from the radio station, I mean, you mentioned this, but those are these formative things that really analogously apply to everything that you do today. And I think that's something that sometimes people overlook, is how those past experiences can apply to what you're doing today. Uh, if you get a little inventive, a little bit creative, I think you can really leverage those really seemingly unrelated experiences to help you wherever you are today.
100%. I mean, I to this day will take stuff from, sometimes it's not even recent stuff. Sometimes it's old stuff. I'll take stuff from like the graphic design on albums that hit right with me back in the day, and I'll figure out a way to bring them forward to today. As an example, but it's like it's again, yes, it's sort of most people would not think that a medical practice could have any connection whatsoever to DIY, punk, alternative, any, like, what do you talk, like, those aren't, have nothing to do
Yeah.
with each other. But I'd say no, it's the same thing. It is the same thing in my mind. And I both know that to be true, but I also know how messed up that probably sounds. It seems to be, but it's just truth. 100% truth. So yeah.
Well, what about the sort of so you can do this on your own. You're not going to let others dictate.
Mhm.
You mentioned David versus Goliath. So how how do you today uh, sort of harness that willingness to go against the grain while still retaining, a professional composure, right? Because you're not an angry 17-year-old anymore that can
Right.
just, throw rocks, right,
Right.
at the establishment.
Well, yeah, and I'll go this way too. Is when I was 17 and 18, 19, 20, I never, I never looked the part, and I kind of took pride in not looking the part. So, like, as an example, I ran, when I was running the radio station, there's a huge thing where the student government tried to cut our funding down and so forth and so on. So I had to kind of lead the charge to basically, for our own existence. It was like an existential crisis for the radio station, and so me, as sort of buttoned up, brown guy, not with, back when I had hair, no mohawk, no nothing. I'm just like kind of look more like an accountant than anything else. Was more punk than a mohawk was punk, if that makes sense. So to me, punk is an
Totally makes sense. Yeah.
attitude,
Hmm.
and I've had so much attitude that I don't need the paraphernalia. Like, I just don't need it. And I still, to this
Yeah.
day, like when I go to, I mean, it could be all sorts of shows, but when I go to a show, I'm nothing's changed. Like I'm like the guy who like if any nobody. I mean, and generally speaking, depends on the crowd, but I think from a sort of how do you say this? People who go to these sorts of shows are usually, in it, they're going there for the music and, they'll certainly notice like if somebody sort of doesn't seem to be, sort of like he's like he's not, right, doesn't belong here. Rarely will that become an issue or become a problem, in a negative way. So anyway, I guess back to my point is I've always sort of kind of, I kind of lived to the beat of my own drummer, including as it relates to music. And though the voice in my head is absolutely more. I mean, it's the name that comes to mind. It's not necessarily him, but Johnny Rotten is in my head at all times. I'm always like, meaning as an attitude to see the world. And think what you will about the Sex Pistols and Johnny Rotten in particular. Their existence changed the entire arc of music as we know it. Music would not be what it is if not for them. And it was very much a disruption, a very much a reaction to what was there. And so I think about what, like, again, I know nobody else thinks about this and nobody in my company thinks about it like this. I think about it though, it constantly in my head is this sort of punk rock mindset. This we are here to create, and the first act of creation is destruction. And as bigger that Advent gets, I always kind of come back to those sort of roots, and they're timeless in many ways. So yeah.
Yeah, so that destroy rebuild concept, I get it, and I hear you on Johnny Rotten. Uh, I would still though take it, maybe a step in a slightly different direction, and I would point to like a Henry Rollins, who's
Mhm.
probably a little more of a sort of a Renaissance man and a little bit more about rebuilding. Johnny Rotten, I think, is in many ways, while he had a band after the Sex Pistols, Public Image Limited, he's very much someone who destroyed and created something new and is still sort of trying to milk that for every last drop
Sure.
possible. Whereas someone like a Henry Rollins sort of iterated on that thing, was part of that rebuilding, and has continued to build and invent and reinvent time and again. And this isn't, some advocacy for, Henry Rollins as being some great creative necessarily. Um, I'd say he's probably has more misses than hits in my book. Um, but he is someone who has continually created something new and invented and reinvented and put these things out into the world that have positively impacted many lives, while also maintaining that same ethos about sort of a fearlessness about doing things differently, and speaking the proverbial truth to the proverbial power.
Yeah. Understood. Do you feel like um, is punk is the punk ethos and attitude dead in 2025? Because it feels dead to me. And when I
Mm.
say that, I mean the. I wonder if so. Music and punk and DIY in particular for you and for me were so impactful and formative, to our middle age, even to this day in our graybeard middle age, state. So the kids of today, what influence is happening right now that they'll be talking about when they're our age, if that makes sense?
And it's all the same. You asked if it's dead. I would say no. It's different, but I went to see a hardcore band. Uh, I don't know, 2 months ago, and there were 600, 700 people there, and half of them were under the age of 21 probably,
Mm,
and they're discovering this thing anew, and you could see the same fervor that we possessed, at that age. It's the same thing. What they're the specifics of what they're railing against um, are different, but it's the same thing. It's conformity. It's uh, stupid expectations. It's stupid politicians. It's stupid self. It's warring against the self to be the best version of yourself. It's all of these things. So it's there. The vehicles have changed, and they don't have to. Take a bus to the record store and have $10 to only buy one record. That's different. They can spend $10 a month and have access to everything on Spotify. Uh, and maybe that's a different discussion for a different day on how I feel about some of those things. But yeah, it's different, but some things never change. We're always going to be pissed off. We're always going to be railing against authority and try to figure out how to do things better um, than the status quo.
I get you. So the future leaders of dental sleep medicine were in the mosh pit at that show, probably.
No,
Little did
no,
they know.
yeah,
Little did they know as they were
yeah,
slamming into each other that
yeah, yeah.
the future that was going to
I
come
think those
from.
guys were all roadies, or maybe they were bouncers protecting anybody else. They were the gatekeepers.
Oh, I see. I
Yeah,
see. Do you think
yeah.
I actually I feel, and I could be wrong, I just feel like rock music, and I consider punk rock an offshoot of rock music. I just feel like it's dead. I know you just said what you just said, but I just
Mhm.
I feel like the when I say dead, I mean it's not connected to the soul. And again, I'm American, United States centric, so it's not connected to the soul of this country like it was when we grew up. And times change. I mean, like somebody who was my age when I was born would have said the same thing probably about jazz, as an example. So, and so genres come and go, and I just feel like rock and punk rock had their day in the sun, and it's probably they're like legacy music at this point. And even like hip hop and rap I feel like is sort of it's I'll go there. And I'm not a I'm more of a passive observer of that than an active participant. But I'd say I feel like that's closer to the like the heart and soul of America today than rock is. And honestly, probably depends on it's probably just depends on where you're at. Country is absolutely much more, way more of a thing than it was, back when we were growing up, as far as like
Oh
being
yeah,
like front and center. So
yeah. Well, I
um,
mean, certainly, rap and hip hop are, I would say, they, sort of rule the airwaves today. And but in many ways, well, with pretty much with rock, for example, you've got subgenres of rock, and with hip hop, I would say the same thing. I mean, I have been a huge hip hop fan since my early teens. And there is a lot of hip hop that, in its attitude, is very much anti-establishment and is sort of punk rock in its sentiment. Um, as far as rock being dead, I I'm I I hear you. It doesn't rule the airwaves anymore. But I went and saw the Foo Fighters in Denver in August, and they sold out the whatever the Colorado Rockies, I think, or maybe it's
right.
football stadium. I don't know. They sold out. It was the largest U.S. show they'd ever played. 65,000 something people there. The band that I mentioned, the show that I went to, the hardcore punk hardcore show that I went to a couple months ago, was a band called Bane, and I booked that band probably 25, 26 years ago, and they played the little back room of a club with probably 60 people there. There were 800 people there this time.
Okay.
So it changes. I hear what you're saying. If you're going to put on, your whatever your XM radio, top 40 hits, you're probably not going to hear a lot of guitar, drum, and bass driven music. But there are these pockets and subgenres that are increasingly popular. Just with a different audience, you got to go out there and find it. It's not the same as going and digging through the crates at the record store, but there's still stuff that's popping that's just kind of in the underground a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. All
Do the
right.
work,
Well,
Mother. You got to do the work, man. You got to go find
I,
it.
I I do the work. I'm also just I'm cognizant of the seasons of life, and I feel like um, one thing I do is if there's a band that's anywhere near me that is playing, if I marginally like them, and if I don't, even if I don't feel like it, I'm going to find my way to go see them usually, because I do believe that like a lot of the acts from back, I mean, it's obvious. Lots of people die, and lots of these acts will not be around for very long. And so, seeing them, I mean, let me go this way. There's something powerful about live music. Well, human experience in general. Live is better than any alternative, and the concert experience in particular, big or small, in my life, there are moments in my life that only exist because I was there in that moment in time, and again, that's part of life, I guess. And I guess just I was thinking about this, and I'm going to formulate an answer in my head, but before I do, I'm going to put you on the spot. Is what is the single most impactful music concert that you've ever been to, and why?
Oh my gosh. And I can't give you one. There's been so many, but that to your point, uh, being there, experiencing it in real life, whatever had going on, um, maybe the friend I was at the show with has since passed because, as you
Yeah.
mentioned, we all die. Uh,
Yeah.
Maybe it was that. Maybe it was at other times it was a band that I just really wanted to see, and maybe I'd seen them 3 or 4 times, but whatever was going on at that point in my life, it all just kind of coalesced to make it extra special. But there have been so many memorable experiences. I mean, how just a few months ago I went and saw D Antwoord, which is a South African hip hop group that I just never thought I'd have an opportunity to see live. And I was there with my wife, and it was just incredible, blew me away. But there's probably some recency effect going on, with that. Um,
Yeah.
I've just been so fortunate to see so many incredible bands live and have so many amazing experiences over the year, whether it was a band that I was in and the riot broke out, um,
Yeah.
to, all these different things. Well, so that was all set up for you. What was
Because
yours?
you didn't answer the question, but I'm going to ramble, and then you might answer with your own. The one that can the reason I asked you, and I don't know why it came into my head, but it was there was a band called No Means No,
Yeah.
which was a Canadian punk band out of Vancouver, and they played. It was probably 1991 in Dayton, Ohio. I was home for the summer in college, and they played. This was back when bands would play. They played like in a factory that was just shut down. It was nighttime. So, and we didn't go to see No Means No. We went to see a band called Coffin Break, which is another band around that time. So it's this Coffin Break who's opening up for No Means No. I never heard of No Means No. And um, I that and it's basically No Means No is like two brothers, and then there's like a revolving one person or something. That was the tightest band I've ever seen in my life. And usually, in order to like music, I've had to have heard it before, but it was just like this incredible fury. I don't know how to describe it. So that was, I mean, I've seen many concerts, but that one was like the most. That was one of those like I don't know how you say it, like it just changed how I thought about the world. And then you know, looked for music like that, but seeing them live, I only saw that was the only time I ever saw them, and it was just super. It was just they were so tight that it was just like it was like the power of human beings, like seeing that and seeing something so it was like three people making sounds so tight and so it was like tribal. Maybe I'll go that way. It's like a
Yeah,
tribal experience with three old fat Canadian guys up on
yeah.
stage, but it was
But
like
but
it
you
was
know, but that's the thing, you know, and we've talked about these related things in the past, or tangentially related. There's there are three fat Canadian guys somewhere right now,
Mhm.
and here we are talking about the impact, the effect that it had on your life. And at the risk of being corny here, that is a potential that every one of us has. We have the potential to make an impact on other people like that, just with the things that we create, not setting out to do, you know, with that purpose in mind, but it happens. I mean, uh, not to put myself on par with three fat Canadian guys in the early '90s, but um, I mean, I've heard it with the Transform Dental Sleep book. I've had over the weekend. I had so many dentists come to me and share specific things that they've changed in their lives, not just in their practice, but in their daily practice, how they live as a result of things that they read in that book. And you know, we just all possess the ability to make a profound impact on others, and that's something that I think these bands, you know, you with Advent, me with Transform Dental Sleep, that we shouldn't disregard is our ability to impact others.
100%. What as we wrap this episode up, what is the most punk rock thing that you have on tap for Transform Dental Sleep?
I would say the next thing would be this book coming out, written in the scars. It's pretty damn punk rock. It's I would
Okay.
say it's the embodiment of punk rock and attitude, spirit, and experience. Yeah. What about yourself? Let me throw that back at you. What's the most punk rock thing coming up for Advent?
It's it's my attitude more than so it's a bit of a cop out. It isn't I don't it won't be my book. I'll promise you that. My book will not be you know, will not be representing in that way. But I think I've got I have a refreshed attitude towards my business that is what I was saying before. I put out a social media post, like I don't even know, maybe at the beginning of the year is what it was, which is the in order to create, you must destroy. And to me, I have the attitude and energy about my organization in a positive way, meaning that I think the reason that people stop growing and organizations stop growing and become stagnant is you become too enamored with what you are and what you
Mm-hmm.
have. And just so happens, and maybe this is sort of why we're doing this episode to some extent, is I believe the world should have some forewarning on this. Is you know, Advent is an organization that was just so happened to be founded by somebody who understands the power of destruction and destroying some things that you feel are very precious in order to create what is necessary. So that's, I guess, to me, the most punk rock thing I'll do is show up for work at 9 o'clock on Tuesday and have the mindset I have about the work that we need to do. And yeah, there's going to be we don't need to get into details, but I'd say there's going to be many things in my organization that many people hold sacred and are like, oh, these are very precious. That I'm looking forward to smashing on the ground and creating what needs to be created. So that's just me.
Well, there's a cliffhanger. I guess we'll stay posted.
I'll keep you in the
Well,
know.
it
So
sounds like everyone will feel the reverberation from that earthquake.
And they can thank punk rock and Johnny Rotten and a lot of them. So until next time,
Sounds good. All right.
good. Thanks, Jason.